I now call the hearing on the Department of the Army's fiscal year 2023 budget request. This is a hybrid meeting, so I'm going to go over a few housekeeping matters. Members joining us virtually, once you start speaking, there is a slight delay before you're displayed on the main screen. Speaking into the microphone activates the camera, displaying the speaker on the main screen. Do not stop your remarks if you do not immediately see the screen switch. The screen does not change until after several seconds, so please make sure you're not muted. To minimize background noise and ensure that the correct speaker is being displayed, we ask that you remain on mute unless you have sought recognition. Myself or a staff designee may mute participants' microphones when they are not under recognition to eliminate inadvertent background noise. Members who are virtually on part of this hearing, you are responsible for muting and unmuting yourself. However, if I notice that you're recognized and you have not unmuted yourself, I will ask the staff to send you a request to unmute yourself, and you'll probably hear me ask you if you're unmuted. Please accept that request, though, from the staff so that you're no longer muted. And finally, House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing to any of our hearings. And that email address has been provided to your staff ahead of this meeting. So we're going to adhere to a strict 5-minute rule today because we have to adjourn at a set time in order to accommodate major activity on the House floor. This morning, the subcommittee will receive testimony from the fiscal year 2023 budget request for the Department of the Army. Our two witnesses are the Honorable Christine Worth, Secretary of the Army, and General James McConville, Chief of Staff of the Army. I should slow down. I'm trying to get this all in 5 minutes. Both of you have had a long, distinguished careers, and we thank you for appearing here with us today. This is an extraordinary time for the United States Army. Over 175,000 soldiers are deployed around the world, including those in Eastern Europe supporting Ukraine. And Mr. Womack and I had a chance to see some of them, along with Mr. Carter. Soldiers are the Army's most critical resource, and we care deeply about their welfare and quality of life. So today we'll talk about the training, equipment, and resources needed to give our soldiers and skills and tools that they need to accomplish their mission. We know that your public message is people first, and I commend you for adding $70 million to requests for child care. But we must do more to reduce wait lists and expand eligibility. We want to find out how your policies and budget reflects the people as your top priority. We're also keeping a close eye on equipment modernization. The request invests heavily in your signature modernization programs, and we are excited to see many of these capabilities are in the hands of soldiers soon. This committee has overwhelmingly supported your modernization strategy by providing the necessary resources to advance these acquisition programs. However, I don't want to lose sight of existing capabilities and the support our soldiers need to keep them safe right now. One example is vehicle rollovers. Congress made a significant investment in fiscal year 2022 to help prevent future vehicle accidents. I'm interested in knowing what the Army is doing to address this issue, both from the vehicle standpoint and also making sure everyone buckles up. Finally, turning to Ukraine, I'm interested in knowing how the U.S. equipment supporting Ukraine land forces has improved their success on the battlefield and how it's impacting the U.S. stock of equipment here at home. What lessons you're learning and what will help guide you for operational strategy in the future. Now, before I yield to the distinguished ranking member, let me say once again, we have a joint session at 11 o'clock on the floor, and House rules will prohibit us from meeting during the joint session. So with that, I turn to you, Mr. Calvert.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair McCollum, and thank you, Secretary Wormuth and General McConville, for your time today as we discuss the Army's fiscal year 2023 budget. In addition to my disappointment with the overall request for defense spending, I'm concerned that the Army continues to be the bill payer for the needs of the other services. On top of an inadequate top-line number, the Army's unfunded priorities list comes at a whopping $5.1 billion. This indicates to me that the Department of Defense is not properly budgeting for the needs of the U.S. Army. As we've seen in Ukraine, a potential war with China is not the only type of conflict that the U.S. military needs to be ready for. We need to maintain, modernize, and equip our Army. Further, it is critical that we remain laser-focused on the Army's top modernization priorities. I don't know how you are going to do that by returning to traditional acquisition bureaucracy. I'm increasingly frustrated by the DoD budgeting for items unrelated to warfighting. For example, in fiscal year 2023, the Army is going to spend nearly $726 million on climate change initiatives. With that amount of money, the Army could fund all the research personnel needs of its unfunded priority list and still have $145 million left. I'm also concerned about end strength. This budget request shrinks the force from fiscal year 2022 enacted level of 485,000 to 473,000. The Army's explanation is that it's difficult to recruit in the current job market. So the question obviously will be, how is the Army planning to overcome this issue? The nation needs a capable and ready Army, prepared to deploy anywhere in the world on a moment's notice. I don't believe this request is sufficient or addresses the impact inflation is going to have on your purchasing power. I look forward to the hearing how Congress and the Army can work together this fiscal year to meet these challenges. And with that, thank you for taking the time to be with us, and I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you please proceed?
Good morning, Chair McCollum, Ranking Member Calvert, distinguished members of the committee. Thank you all for your ongoing support of the Army as we significantly transform to meet future threats. We've accomplished a lot this year, but we have a lot more work to do. We remain very focused on our top three key priorities: people, readiness, and modernization. The FY23 budget enables us to support the National Defense Strategy, take care of our people, and meet operational demands here at home and abroad. We're investing $35 billion in modernization, almost $2 billion in military housing and infrastructure, and we're funding 22 combat training center rotations in FY23. We are modestly reducing our end strength, and we're doing this because we want to preserve a high-quality force. We did not want to have to lower our recruiting standards as we face a challenging recruiting environment. We are looking at, Ranking Member, to your point, we are looking at what we can do immediately this summer to help ourselves and the kinds of changes to our recruiting enterprise that we may need to make to help ourselves over the next couple of years. We're committed to maintaining momentum on our 6 major modernization portfolios. In FY23 alone, we will field 4 long-range precision fire systems: the long-range hypersonic weapon, our ship-sinking mid-range capability, the precision strike missile, and the extended-range cannon artillery. We're also modernizing our air and missile defense systems, and we're funding development of both FARA and FLRAA, which we intend to field in FY 2030. As important as it is to maintain momentum on modernization, people are the strength of our Army and our greatest asset. This budget increases soldier and Department of Army civilian pay and funds a number of quality of life improvements, including barracks, family housing, and various child care initiatives. To reduce harmful behaviors, we're building out a prevention workforce that will help us with our efforts to build cohesive teams that are trained, disciplined, and fit. Our Sharp Fusion Center Directorate pilot brings together in one place all of the resources for victims of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and those pilots are up and running in installations around the country. We're also striving to prevent suicide in our ranks. We've started conducting 100% mental health wellness checks in some of our units, and we're surging behavioral health resources where they're most needed, even as we confront a nationwide shortage of providers. As we focus taking care of soldiers and their families and transforming to meet future threats, the Army is also playing a key role in the here and now. Today, we have over 47,000 soldiers in Europe to help reassure our allies, deter aggression against NATO territory, and to help Ukraine defend itself. As you all know, the Army has provided a wide range of lethal assistance to Ukraine. And while we're focused on Europe, we have not taken our eye off the pacing challenge of China in the Indo-Pacific. Through Operation Pathways, we have deployed thousands of Army forces and equipment sets to the region for exercises that strengthen joint force integration, demonstrate combat capability, and promote interoperability. In just the last 2 years, for example, the 5th Security Force Assistance Brigade has sent 40 advisory teams to over 14 countries in the region. To continue our transformation efforts, we are pursuing cutting-edge experimentation and innovation. Much of our experimentation activity will culminate this fall in Project Convergence 22, where our sister services will join us with operational units and new technologies to work together to solve important operational challenges. America's Army is fit, trained, and ready when called upon to fight and win the nation's wars. We are transforming for the future, something we absolutely have to do in the dangerous environment we face. I'm very proud of all our soldiers are doing to protect our country and look forward to your questions this morning.
Microphone. Thank you very much. Sir, please, your testimony.
Well, good morning, Chair McCollum, Ranking Member Calvert, distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and for your continued support to the Army and its people, our soldiers from all three components, our families, our civilians, and our soldiers for life, our retirees and veterans. The men and women of the United States Army stand ready today to fight and win our nation's wars as a member of the Joint Force. I could not be more proud of each and every one of them. The Army is well aligned with the National Defense Strategy through our existing priorities of people, readiness, and modernization. We win through our people. They are our greatest strength, and they are our most important weapon system. That is why people remain the Army's #1 priority. We're in a war for talent. That means recruiting our nation's best and modernizing our talent management systems. That means retaining our best. We recruit soldiers, but we retain families. So we're ensuring access to quality housing, health care, child care, spouse employment, and PCS moves. When our soldiers get the call that it's time to deploy, we want them to be laser focused on their mission, knowing that their families are well taken care of at home. Above all, putting our people first means building cohesive teams that are highly trained, disciplined, and fit, and ready to fight and win. Being ready today is not good enough, though. We must also make sure we are ready tomorrow. And that's what modernization is all about, future readiness. The Army continues to undergo its greatest transformation in over 40 years, and we remain committed to our 6 modernization priorities. We have 24 signature modernization systems we will have in the hands of soldiers by FY24, FY23, either for testing or fielding. Also in FY23, we'll stand up the 3rd of our 5 multi-domain task forces. The U.S. Army never fights alone, so we continue to invest in strengthening our relationships with allies and partners across the globe. We can see the return on those investments in our response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Never before have we asked so many to move so quickly. We cannot do it without the access and presence our allies and partners provide. In less than a week, the 1st Armored Brigade of the 3rd Infantry Division was able to deploy from Fort Stewart, Georgia, and be on the ground in Germany, starting live fire exercises with tanks drawn from our Army pre-positioned stocks in Europe. That is a testament to our tactical and strategic readiness, to the quality of our incredible logisticians, and to the investments Congress has made over the past several years in setting the European theater. When it's time to go, we go with the Army we have. And the Army we have is the world's greatest fighting force. You must ensure it stays that way, and with your continued support, we will. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. The sum of what you both said is we need to be prepared for today and ready for tomorrow, and putting our people first. I just wanted to point out that I am very pleased with what the President is doing in focusing on climate change in this budget. The DoD, and I quote from it, "Climate change is reshaping geostrategical, operational, and tactical environment with significant implications for the United States national security. The request prioritizes the departmental investments that enhance operational capability, mission, resilience, and readiness." And the DoD being the largest consumer of energy, anything that we can do to make sure that you have the energy you need in a timely fashion that's also green, that reduces greenhouse gases, is a win-win for the United States taxpayers, the Army, and our climate at large. And we are witnessing now conflicts are already starting to take place because of climate change. So just for the record, I wanted you to know you had the chair's support on that. I'd like to talk about the Army's acquisition roles and responsibilities. On May 3rd, the Army issued a new directive which clarifies Army's Futures Command roles and responsibilities. The Commanding General of Army Futures Command will now coordinate with the Assistant Secretary of the Army for acquisitions, logistics, and technology, and then on research, development, and acquisition efforts. This responsibility for all over supervision of acquisition and oversight of the service's research and development activities, including science, technology, effectively puts that person in charge of acquisition issues after several years of ambiguity which had existed. So I have a couple of questions for you. Why was this change necessary? And this recent directive, seems to have shifted some of the influence away from Army's Future Command, something I really delved into as my state was one of the states in competition for this. So I actually kind of know the details on how this was presented to Congress pretty well. And if you keep this change and you move forward with it, do you intend to keep the ACF as a 4-star command? And what does that mean for the cross-functional teams? Very concerned about this change and determining acquisition requirements in the Army.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to clarify what we are trying to do around our modernization enterprise with this directive. First of all, we are not downgrading Army Futures Command. Army Futures Command will remain a 4-star command. I'm a big supporter of Army Futures Command. I think they're doing a great job, and I think they have been very instrumental, frankly, in a lot of the progress that the Army has made in the last few years. There have been some ambiguities in the previous directive that talked about the relationships between Army Futures Command and the Assistant Secretary for Acquisition, and this directive was just trying to clean up some of that ambiguity. The approach the Army takes to modernization is a team approach. We have multiple organizations inside the Army that are playing roles, and we just wanted to clarify that. This directive does not change the role of the cross-functional teams. It does not downgrade the role of Army Futures Command. It really just tries to clarify some ambiguity to make sure that all parts of the Army enterprise for modernization are clear on what they're doing. And really, at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding. We do not want to slow down the progress that we have been making. And if I see any indication that that's happening, we will deal with it immediately.
Thank you. I'll be having a conversation with the authorizers to make sure we're all on the same page as to what your intentions of doing. I have a couple of questions I'm going to be putting in for the record. I only have a minute remaining. I just want to highlight, though, this one for the record that I'm putting in about what's happening with medical billets. I'm very concerned that the Army still to this day has not shown me that they've really thought ahead what it's going to do to the communities placing all these Army families and some of the other medical care that our soldiers are going to need out in the community. We have, even before COVID, we were short of doctors, nurses, and facilities in some areas, and we owe it to their families and we owe it to those who wear the uniform that they have the health care that they need. The other thing I'm very concerned about is the Department of Defense right now is doing an amazing work in picking up and doing what it can by channeling within career opportunities and also getting people from outside the Army to come in to work on medical research as well as deliver care. Army hospitals, clinics provide the backbone for training a lot of our physicians, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, and the rest. So expect some more conversation on that. With that, I yield to Mr. Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary, I'm glad to hear that that you're bolstering Army Futures Command in the sense that you're going to make sure, as from your testimony, that the acquisition enterprise that is taking place there continues to develop the agility and the speed that warfighters need. And so we'll be keeping an eye on that to make sure that that occurs. I am a critic of the procurement process in general out of DOD, as a number of our colleagues, and certainly the Army is no exception, and we need to fix that. Future Vertical Lift, Secretary, please update us on the Future Vertical Lift program. Do both the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft and the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft programs remain on track? Also, I asked this last year as well, what is the Army doing to keep non-traditional firms, such as those that participated in the competition for FARA, engaged to ensure a robust industrial base for innovation? And lastly, for both platforms, what is the Army doing to ensure that the digital engineering practices that made NGAD so successful are being maximized? We should be doing that across the services, by the way.
Thank you, Congressman. I would say both FARA and FLRAA programs are on track. This budget continues to fund those efforts. We are in the process right now of sort of the final stage of down selecting for FLRAA, so I won't say more about that, but we are very pleased with the progress that particular program is making right now. And we are also on track with FARA. We will be choosing a vendor for FARA in FY24. There has been, there have been some challenges with the ITEP engine looking at FARA, so that has created a little bit of a delay in terms of integrating that engine into the prototypes. But I think we're confident that we're going to be able to make that work, and that engine is very important in terms of the energy efficiency that it's going to bring. I think, we've been working very, very closely with industry in both of these programs, and certainly to your question about smaller companies, I think it's very important that we focus on making sure that we have a healthy defense industrial base, and certainly the experience with providing lethal assistance to Ukraine, I think, underscores that. So we're always looking to find opportunities to make sure that we can include smaller companies where we can, to try to make sure that we have more choices there in terms of competition. I don't know, given that General McConville is an aviator, he may want to add.
Well, thank you, Secretary. And both these platforms are what I would call transformational. They'll bring much greater capability when it comes to speed, when it comes to range, and also, ranking member, as you talked about, with open architecture, it'll be able to operate with convergence with the other systems that we're developing. Also the capability, there's a lot of systems we're adding onto this aircraft. Air-launched effects, they're going to provide some very unique capabilities with much longer range to give much more capability. And also the ability to operate with manned-unmanned teaming. Both these aircraft provide. One final thing that I'm pleased with is we're flying before we're buying. So we're getting a chance to see from industry what they can actually do with the aircraft. We're putting soldiers and pilots on it, getting a chance to take a look at it, and then we're coming back with a final set of requirements. Well, I think that's absolutely critical, Ray. I probably didn't do a good job explaining, but the intent with the open architecture system, the intent with Project Convergence, which is the ability to use digital and move data in a data fabric between systems, we think is absolutely critical to getting the lethality we need in our future systems.
On munitions, obviously, we're providing Ukraine with needed Stinger and Javelin missiles, and I suspect we've significantly depleted our own stockpiles in doing so. And how quickly can we replenish those stockpiles?
Congressman, we have begun, using, I think we started $1 billion from the supplemental that you all have given us to start replenishing Javelins right now. I think, it is going to take some time. As you know, we have not had an open production line for Stinger. We do have an open production line with Javelin, but I think it will probably take in the 18 months area to be able to fully replenish our stocks. But we're working with both Raytheon and Lockheed to see what they can do to speed up their production.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We're going to go next to Mr. Rogers and then, Mr. Rupesberger, then Mr. Rogers, and then Ms. Bustos.
Thank you. Secretary Wormuth, General McConville. In Congress, we are witnessing a massive overhaul of modernization efforts and promises from each branch of military service. Cover my mic. I'm not starting out the right way. Okay. Can you hear me now? You got it. Okay. Secretary Wilmoth, I'll start over. General McConville. In Congress, we are witnessing a massive overhaul of modernization efforts and promises from each branch of military service. I agree that people are our greatest asset, and I applaud the efforts of investing in the Army's workforce and modernization talent management. Now, when it comes to managing the talent the Army has in cybersecurity, what initiatives do you currently have, and how are you looking to expand any of them in FY23 in order to maintain our people? Additionally, I've asked Secretary Austin last week, but I'm interested in the Army's perspective on the importance of cybersecurity partnerships and any cyber or information operations lessons learned from Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I have a follow-up too.
Congressman, we certainly are very much committed to growing our cyber force in the Army. And I think the Army, frankly, has really led the way in a lot of its focus on building up its cyber teams. You know, we've put a lot of focus on Army cyber. One initiative that we have that I want to see us explore this year is the authorities that Congress has given us for accepted service for cyber, so that we may be able to, you know, one of our challenges is, frankly, competing with the private sector. You know, everyone is looking for cyber experts, and in the private sector, they're obviously well compensated. So that's something I want to see us explore. You know, we are working very hard at Fort Gordon with the Army Center of Excellence to train our cyber warriors. We have the software factory down at Army Futures Command that is finding, frankly, cyber and coding expertise all over the Army in places that you wouldn't expect, and training those people and giving us the capability to really have Army soldiers kind of at the tactical edge who can code and develop applications for us. So I think we are doing a lot to try to build out our cyber workforce. And certainly to your question on lessons learned from Ukraine, you know, I think what we see there obviously are two things. One, the information domain is incredibly important, and you know, the force that can dominate in the information space, I think, will have the advantage in future conflicts. So there's a lot of a cyber dimension there. And then obviously, while we haven't seen sort of certainly here in the United States major attacks, major cyber attacks on infrastructure, I think that is something that we can expect in the future. So we're looking a lot at how can we shore up vulnerabilities, whether it's, you know, with our suppliers or in our own networks, to make sure that we're not vulnerable to cyber attacks.
What I would add, Congressman, is a couple of things that we're doing is, first of all, we're very blessed that we have a lot of young men and women that want to go into cyber. So if you go up to West Point, you go to ROTC, that is one of the most competitive branches that they're competing for. We're given direct commissions, so we're going out to qualified young men and women that want to serve in cyber. And the other program we're working on is really identifying talent. You know, the Secretary we have a young specialist. He's a medic down at our software factory. He codes at the PhD level. And, you know, we want to be able to do is be able to credential that capability, no formal training, but because of his skill set. So how do we keep that person in the Army? How do we credential that person and then incentivize him to stay? And we're working on those type of programs.
Okay, and I know the Army leads the Joint Force experiment called Project Convergence, and it's imperative for the military to talk and share data. Now, I will be touring the Joint System Integration Laboratory at Aberdeen this Friday, and in my district. What type of experimentation do you have planned for this year? And additionally, as the Army invests significant resources in network modernization, how are you coordinating with other services to ensure joint interoperability?
Congressman, I think, you know, the ability of the services to be able to share data is going to be one of the most important things that we have to figure out if we're going to be effective in the future. conflicts. And that is exactly what we're trying to do at the Joint Service Integration Lab. We are really working there with other services and ultimately in Project Convergence this fall to figure out how can we share data, not just among Army platforms from sensors to our platforms, but also with the other services. So for example, we have a program called Rainmaker that is actually an artificial intelligence kind of program that helps us knit together data from different platforms and different services, because if we can't share that, we're not going to be able to connect, you know, the sensor to the best shooter and then to the target that it needs to find. So that is exactly what we're working on. I think it's, I think what we're doing at Project Convergence is frankly some of the most innovative stuff looking at JADC2, and delighted to hear that you're going up to JSO later this week.
Okay.
Thank
And my
you.
time's up. Are you about?
Yeah, if we're quick and other members, come in and out, we might get a second round in. So, Mr. Rogers, then Ms. Bustos, Mr. Womack. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to the subcommittee. We're glad you're here, and thank you for your service to the country. Let me ask you about the European Deterrence Initiative. We all know that the countries of Europe are shivering, frightened by what's going on in Ukraine. And I want to ask you, what happened? The European Deterrence Initiative was designed to prevent the kind of thing we're seeing in Europe writ large today. We've poured billions of dollars since 2014 into the deterrence initiative. How does that fit in with NATO, other European-based defense groups, and the like?
Congressman, I would say, I think frankly, we are seeing today the value of the investments that Congress has supported in the European Deterrence Initiative over the last few years. As one example, for example, I would point to the investments that the Army has been able to make into its pre-positioned equipment in Europe. So because of the fact that we've invested in having modernized stocks in Europe ready to go, stuff that were in warehouses where the batteries worked, and when our troops fell in on it, they were able to take it right out of the warehouses and go into live fire training in less than a week. And that, I think, was very much because of the benefit of European deterrence initiative. So I think that's been very valuable. I think you've seen that Putin understands, I think, and does see the Article 5 commitments and NATO territory as a red line. I think given how focused he seems to be, despite the fact that his invasion into Ukraine was clearly a strategic major miscalculation, even as his forces continue to suffer setbacks, I think whether he could have been deterred from going into Ukraine is tough to say. I think he was just intent on doing that, even though, frankly, it's clearly backfiring on him.
Well, we all know that he has indicated over the years the inclination to annex to the Soviet Union, the new Soviet Union, Sweden, and others. How does the EDI play in that kind of warfare?
I think what EDI has enabled us to do is to invest in our infrastructure in NATO countries, invest in exercises so that we're able to demonstrate the combat capability of our forces. And all of that, I think, contributes to showing Putin that the NATO alliance is not something that he wants to tangle with. And I think should Finland and Sweden join NATO, I think, that will strengthen the alliance only further.
Switching topics, let me bring up quickly an issue often thought about at your level, but It's my understanding that the Army plans on divesting from the legacy camouflage systems by 2023 with the intention of modernizing to ultra-lightweight camouflage net systems, or ULCANs. This technology is phenomenal. When a soldier dons it, I'm told, they virtually become invisible to even the most advanced enemy sensors. In fact, we've seen this technology pay off in spades in Ukraine. Simply put, this technology will undoubtedly save lives. Currently, the onus of procurement lies upon each individual unit in which they must use their limited funds to acquire this life-saving technology. This is where my concern arises. Despite the upcoming divestment deadline, the Army has yet to ramp up procurement of ULCANs, leaving the industrial base at risk of shutting down and denying us this equipment for many years to come. Can you please provide some more detail as to how the Army plans on replacing the legacy camouflage systems by 2023?
Congressman, certainly we want to make sure that our soldiers are well camouflaged and, in the future battlefield, being able to be camouflaged, in an environment where, frankly, our adversaries are going to be able to see quite a bit is very important. I'm not familiar with the specific camouflage equipment that you're referring to. I will look into that. Again, I think we want to make sure that our soldiers are well camouflaged. So that's something I'd be happy to look into and talk with you further.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. Bustos.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Wormuth and General McConville, thank you very much for your leadership. Briefly, the district that I represent is the entire northwest corner of the state of Illinois. And as my colleagues on this subcommittee know, we're home to the Rock Island Arsenal. I typically have a question about the Rock Island Arsenal, and I want to do that today. It is literally located on an island between the states of Iowa and Illinois. The Rock Island Arsenal, though, is probably best known for its factory there. And I'm going to get to that in a second question, but it also houses several other critical organizations, including the Joint Munitions Command that we all know as JMC. And it's responsible for the management of ammunition, production, of storage, distribution, and demilitarization for all U.S. military services. And so as you can imagine, the men and women at JMC, including several now who are deployed from the Rock Island Arsenal, have been working very, very hard to make sure that our needs and our allies' needs are met in Eastern Europe and Ukraine since Putin's invasion. So I'm hoping that if either one of you could speak to the work that JMC is doing to oversee the logistics involved in this conflict, if we can talk about that, and just a couple other follow-up questions, all interrelated there. But are there ways that that I should be aware of, or this subcommittee should be aware of, that we can make that work easier or support that, where we can make sure that they're getting the job done? And really, in short, how's it going, and how can we be of help?
Thank you, Congressman. I think, frankly, one of the things we're seeing that has proved very problematic for the Russians are their challenges with logistics. And I think that's one of the things that sets our Army apart. And part of why we've been able to do the amazing things that we've done in support of Ukraine is because of our logistics system. And AMC and JMC have done a fantastic job. It's been remarkable, frankly, to see how quickly they've been able to move ammunition. And I think, obviously we're going to have work to do in terms of replenishing our stocks. So, we will continue to support our workforce that works on ammunition, because we're seeing, just how important it is. And that's something that the Army has invested more in, frankly, in the last couple of budget cycles. I don't know, Chief, if you want to add anything.
I just think they're doing fabulous work. We like to say that professionals study logistics and amateurs tactics, and we're seeing that play out. And when we take a look at all the weapons and ammunition that they've supported the Ukrainians with, it is making a huge difference. And we certainly have to replenish those weapon systems and that ammunition, and they're working that right now as we speak.
All right, thanks to you both. So let's look at that factory that I mentioned at the start of my questions. So the Rock Island Arsenal is designated as the Army's Advanced Manufacturing Center of Excellence, and that supports the Army's broad goals for this capability. And the type of work that they're doing really could change how we address supply chain issues and allow us to completely rethink how we develop certain weapon systems, really with also a goal of having significant savings. So one quick example, they're currently developing a jointless hull or chassis for the next generation combat vehicle, and which we see it as it could streamline manufacturing and make the vehicle safer. So I'd like to get both of your perspective, if I could, on the importance of advanced and additive manufacturing to the Army and how the Army plans to move forward for maximizing the use of this type of technology.
Well, as you said, Congresswoman, I think additive manufacturing, offers a lot of opportunity for us. Among other things, it would give us, and does give us in many cases, the capability to produce parts that are much farther away, if you will, from the defense industrial base. So, we're able to resupply and maintain our equipment much farther away from than we've been able to do in the past. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. We're certainly proponents of additive manufacturing and using it to its maximum effect. I think one of the issues that we do have some work to do on is looking at standards for parts and making sure that we have a common set of standards in terms of the safety of parts, and that's something that we are working on, but I think there's a lot of opportunity here.
Very good. General, anything to add in the remaining 18 seconds?
Oh, I just think there's a lot of efficiency and effectiveness by being able to manufacture parts. Historically, we've used the Iron Mountain, where we take a whole bunch of parts and have to bring them around with us, and then by having this capability, it's an insurance policy, we can quickly make the parts we need.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Madam Secretary. And Madam Chair, I yield back.
Your timing was perfect. You were better than the rest of us so far. Mr. Womack, then Ms. Kirkpatrick, and then Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, General McConville, thank you again for being with us this morning and for your continued service to this country. Just as a kind of an opening, some of our colleagues went over to Europe and spent a little time with the Third ID over at Graf, spent some time with the 82nd in Poland. And I got to tell you, the ability for us to be able to move those forces into those postures with the speed and professionalism that we did, I think speaks well of the Army's ability to surge, and I congratulate you for that. I have a question about in-strength. I was reminded by one of my district's soon-to-be newest West Point graduates that she chose the Army over other service academies because she wanted to lead people. And while I understand this budget request will not eliminate her chance to be a platoon leader or company commander, proposed in-strength cuts equate to that of almost three entire brigade combat teams in numbers. Chief, the Army's been our response force to the ongoing war in Europe, and their ability to cultivate and sustain personal and long-standing mill-to-mill relationships is an absolute requirement. It's invaluable to assets that leaders like Admiral Aquilino and General Flynn have discussed with me as crucial to building capacity in the Indo-Pacific region. So I'm concerned that we're increasing our demand for Army formations, but shrinking our overall number of soldiers. Can you explain to the committee the challenges the Army's facing in terms of recruitment and operational capacity?
Well, thank you, Congressman, and we appreciate you visiting our troops. I had a chance to see them over there, and the investments you all have made that's why the 82nd could draw vehicles over there. That's why the 1st and the 3rd Infantry could draw vehicles. But, as far as young men and women, what we've found is 23% of Americans are qualified to come in the military right now. And 83% of the young men and women that are coming into the Army are coming from military families. So what we think is we've got to get more exposure. An interesting factoid is 44% of the young men and women that come into the military are coming from schools with JROTC. Not necessarily in JROTC, but the fact they've had some exposure to the military is really important. So we need help from everybody to explain the advantages of going into the military. I signed all 3 of my kids up and have a son-in-law, and I think it's a great place for young men and women to get an education and to develop their skill sets, and I think we ought to offer that to everybody.
Well, I congratulate you on your talent management strategies, and because I think it's paying off. I want to pivot to the Indo-Pacific region. It's been made obvious to this committee the Army is being pivoted to the region measurably slower than, say, the Navy and the Air Force. While some of that is obviously inherent based on capabilities and planning for a future A280 environment, I know that your formations continue to train and plan for their role in that region. Can you briefly describe for the committee how certain training and mission exercises, say Pacific Pathways, enables the Army to uniquely prepare for a future fight in the Indo-Pacific, and how important the Army will be in that, in that case?
Well, I think our peace in the region comes through strength, and that strength comes from allies and partners. You've all been a chance to oversee Europe, and what I took away from that is having American soldiers on the ground makes a huge difference. And a lot of things we did, even with Ukraine, there was a lot of training, a lot of exercising that was done before that actually began. And we have a very strong relationship with Pacific Pathways, working with those countries, helping build their capabilities and capacity, and quite frankly, their will to defend their country. And I think that's very, very important. We continue those exercises and that we have a robust capability in the region with U.S. Army troops.
Madam Secretary, last week the administration advised Congress that in the coming months, DOD is looking at one-for-one unit replacements for about 10,500 personnel that's been deployed in response to the Ukrainian situation. Of note, I believe it's General McConville's former division headquarters will be some of those tagging in. My question centers around these new deployments and the likelihood of them becoming cyclical in nature, or perhaps even part of a permanently established footprint in some places, and the effect of these courses of action that could have on the Army's new regionally aligned readiness and modernization model. I understand that the decisions about this are still kind of out there a few weeks maybe from now, but can you comment briefly on it?
Certainly, Congressman, and that's a great question. I appreciate you shining the spotlight on that. You're right. There is, the discussion about what ultimately posture in Europe is going to look like, after the conflict ends is still ongoing, and I think, will come to a head probably at the Madrid summit later this summer. But I think it is possible that we would see, potentially some rotational deployments over and above what we'd seen a year ago. And we are going to have to factor that into rearm. And we've frankly been keeping a very close eye on that because the units that are scheduled to go into the modernization windows, that's been very carefully crafted. It's been very carefully crafted to make sure that the right people are in those units. So we may have to make some adjustments, but I think we're going to be able to do that, and the planning to do that has already started.
Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing both of you at West Point this weekend for graduation. Go Army, beat Navy. Sorry, Dutch. I yield back.
I have no favorites. Ms. Kilpatrick and then Mr. Carter.
Thank you. My first question is for the Secretary. Congress has previously appropriated $3.5 billion to backfill U.S. military equipment transferred to Ukraine. The second Ukraine supplemental request includes an additional $1.3 billion in procurement funding, plus additional drawdown authority for critical munitions. To date, the U.S. has transferred more than 5,500 Javelin missiles, more than 1,400 Stinger missiles, which, by the way, are made in my district, and more than 50 million rounds of ammunition, in addition to tactical vehicles, UAVs, and other small arms. Our ability to backfill existing stock is critical to our national security. So, Secretary, given that the United States has provided a significant amount of munitions to the Ukrainians, are you concerned about the current stock of equipment such as Stinger and Javelin systems?
Congresswoman, as you noted, we have provided quite a number of Javelins and Stingers to the Ukrainians, and as well as any number of other types of military equipment ranging from helicopters to body armor. And we've been keeping a close eye on what our minimum requirements are as we do that. And we've also, as I noted earlier, been working closely with industry to try to ramp up their production capability, particularly with javelins. With Stingers, we're looking at designing a replacement eventually for Stinger. Obviously we have that on our M-SHORAD system, so that's something we're going to, we certainly have a vested interest in that. But I think the funding that Congress has provided in the supplementals will help us working with industry to replenish our stocks of munitions.
My second question is for the general. Thank you for testifying today and for everything you do in support of our soldiers. I understand that the Army is seeking to improve its ability to deliver what it refers to as long-range precision fires by upgrading current artillery and missile systems, developing new longer-range cannons and hypersonic weapons, and modifying existing air-to-sea launch missiles and cruise missiles for ground launch by Army units. General, please describe the Army's unique role in advancing our long-range fire capabilities and how your investment here is not duplicative of other services.
Yes, Congresswoman. Our number one priority is long-range precision fires, and it begins with hypersonic missiles. We believe that we need to have a land-based capability that's available 24/7, that's rapidly deployable, and we're developing that capability, and we'll have that capability next year. We've also been asked by the combatant commanders to develop a capability to sink ships, and we are developing that mid-range capability, and that'll be delivered next year. We also are developing a precision strike missile capability in excess of 500 kilometers. We could see how that would be very, very effective in some of the combat we're seeing right now, the ability to outrange our adversaries and get after their logistics and get after their command and control. We're also developing extending range cannon, which again allows us to reach out and touch our adversaries further than they have. And all this is being brought together as part of the joint force and part of sensor-to-shooter linkage that we're working on with Project Convergence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Carter, Ms. Capter, and Mr. Kilmer.
First, I'd like to thank you, Madam Chair, for emphasizing the Futures Command. It's one of my big concerns, and I thank you for that. I've had a great visit with you folks this morning. One of the things we've got going on in Texas, and quite frankly, if you read closely around the country, is that the price of housing and the price of rentals is going up exponentially. And about 70% of the people that work for the military live off post, sometimes as high as more. But the rentals are putting them out of ability to be out there, and they're quite honestly having real issues with trying to buy, because the bidding process is taking the values way out of proportion to what they should be. And then finally, I'm told by people that do this for a living that the VA loans, people just won't take them. They'd rather have cash. So these cash operations that are out there are just literally making us unable to use VA loans. Are you aware of this situation? If you got any ideas about doing something better, maybe increasing the BAH.
Thank you, Congressman, and I appreciate you highlighting this challenge, because I think it is an issue, that we all see with housing costs going up in a number of places around the country. And that's something, we certainly want to make sure that our soldiers and their families are able to live in good housing and to afford housing off post. That was one of the reasons that the department increased BAH in, I think, about 50 different locations around the country this year. I think, we are open to looking at something like that, again. But I think one of the challenges we have to work our way through as we think about that is the fact that, if we raise our BAH rates, landlords can sort of see that coming, and then they raise their rents, and you get into a little bit of an unhelpful upward cycle. But I think we do want to look at housing, and, we will have to work with OSD, as you know, since they're the ones who ultimately set the BAH rates.
And that is an issue. I've discussed it when I was over in Korea with the commanding general over there many, many years ago. The Koreans watched and instantly raise their rents. Finally, I talked to you today about the fact that, and it's kind of interesting, in the Department of Defense, 94% of the people, borrowers in the Department of Defense were denied loan forgiveness because they didn't want to do a 10-year commitment of 120 payments before the loan forgiveness came together. The rest of the government doesn't have that burden. Now, why is that, and what can we do to change that?
Congressman, I think this is, again, an area that we want to look into. As we were talking with you earlier this morning, we are in a war for talent, and we're competing against the private sector in a very, very tight job market. So I think we need to be looking at our benefits, our pay, to make sure that we're competitive. And we need to be thinking creatively about what more we can do to make ourselves attractive. And I think this issue of loan forgiveness is something we can look into. We're looking at, as I alluded to in my opening statement, our whole recruiting enterprise and what kinds of changes we may need to make ourselves more attractive in the future over the longer term. And I think this is something that we could include in that.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Ms. Capter, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Kilmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Wormuth and General McConville, thank you so much for your service, your exemplary service to our country. I think each of us feels we would like to do more to help you. But let me try to ask a couple questions. First, I'll ask what I asked Secretary Austin and General Milley. We were recently in Germany and Poland, and the accomplishments of moving that many soldiers, the logistics of that, you were outstanding. But I'll tell you one thing that really bothered me, and that was the food that the soldiers ate. And so my question to you is, who's the highest ranking person at Army that could work with us to look at the nutritional content of what those soldiers eat? I was struck by the fact the MRAs sat there in the bags, and after I talked to the soldiers, why didn't you take that? They said, that's the worst. And I noticed the bread that we had been served was white bread. And I'm going, okay, I need to get into this, because nothing's more important to a soldier than food, especially when they have some of the tank commands and some of the units that we were with, the 82nd Airborne. We want to feed the best to our soldiers. So I need a briefing on that to better follow up and be useful up here as a member on the food front. You don't have to answer, but I think we need to do some repair work there. That's number one. Number two, I come from the Great Lakes part of the United States where General Eisenhower built the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway. I'm asking myself the question, in terms of logistical support to Central Europe, how better can we utilize that corridor, which is the shortest distance between the United States and the ports of Northern Europe and the Baltics, to move humanitarian goods, the really billions of dollars that we voted for to try to help. I represent places like Parma, Ohio, where we have the third largest Ukrainian American population in the country. We have over 140,000 Polish Americans that live in Northern Ohio. I can guarantee you goods are backed up that could be used in that part of the world, starting with medical, starting with tourniquets, starting with Kevlar vests, you name it. And I just think the Army's ability to deal with logistics could help, working with some of these organizations in our region. And that fourth seacoast, this is the moment for which it exists. And so I just ask you to think about that. If there's anybody you could send up here to meet with some of us, I co-chair the Ukraine caucus, we have 90 members. From this particular corridor, we are underperforming. A lot of our folks are enlisted, but I'm telling you, with backhauls, with available space on vessels that are moving through that seaway right now. If we have to move grain this year, guess where we grow it? And so just wanted to mention that, and if you have someone you could send up, believe me, we can gather more members than you would want to shake a stick at in terms of what the unmet potential in this corridor. Number 3, mechanics. I'm very interested in this, and from the statistics we were given in terms of the number of service members who've died due to non-combat tactical vehicle mishaps over the past decade and those who've been injured, I'm wondering, the Army is such a great place for training of mechanics. Our country is 1 million mechanics short right now. If there would be more opportunity for the Army to work with local schools, General, you mentioned this, where there are bases that exist, where we could look at the local school program and do a partnership in terms of mechanics and training in some kind of educational effort. I don't know if you think like that. It may be more in the Guard and Reserve that we have to work, but the country has a real problem. If we're going to do this conversion, we're not ready. We don't have the mechanics that are out there. And so I think this specialty is one that I would very much like to work with Army on, because I think that you really do have the capacity to help the Republic more in this sector. So whether it's on Ukraine or on mechanics or on food, if you want to comment before my time is up, I'd appreciate it.
Ms. Captor, they have about 28 seconds, so they might want to take it for the record.
Okay. We'll take it for the record. Definitely make sure you get briefings on those topics.
Thank you. And we'll have a second round of questions if you would like that then. Mr. Kilmer, and then I'll explain how the second round of questions are going to work. Mr. Kilmer.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you both for being with us. Madam Secretary, I want to start by just applauding you on the February 2022 Army Climate Strategy. I think it does an excellent job encapsulating the problem we face today that the Army both contributes to and is threatened by the extreme weather events caused by climate change. I also want to commend you for committing the Army to track implementation of this strategy and to hold itself accountable moving forward. And I guess that's where I wanted to just dig in a little bit. I specifically wanted to discuss the Army's efforts to procure construction materials with lower embodied carbon emissions, including mass timber, which could help the Army in achieving its objectives. Studies have shown that mass timber buildings compared to concrete buildings would save 36% on energy costs and reduce carbon emissions by 43%. I give the Army credit for adopting this new building material and constructing 5 hotels out of cross-laminated timber at installations across the U.S., including at Joint Base Lewis McChord in my neck of the woods. Those hotels went up at least 37% faster than comparable construction projects and with 40% less labor. And so the benefit of that, I think, could be really helpful in terms of addressing the construction backlog and just recognizing that there's heightened competition for construction labor right now with private industry. So I guess to turn this into a question, can you update the committee on the Army's plans to achieve this procurement objective? To what extent is the Army looking to utilize mass timber's benefits? And has the Army shared any lessons learned from the construction of its mass timber hotels with the other services to ensure that the DoD can realize some similar environmental benefits?
Thank you, Congressman. I think there are definitely some advantages to the cross-laminated timber that you've talked about, certainly in terms of its strength relative to steel and concrete, for example. There also, as I understand it, it is fairly expensive as a building material as well as a result of that. So I think, we want to take a case-by-case approach to it and look at where it makes sense to use it. As you pointed out, some of our IHG hotels have used it, and I think that's, a great demonstration of the value of it in terms of a construction material. And I think, we would be happy to talk to, if we're not already, we would be happy to talk to other services about the experience we've had using that material up in the Northwest.
Super. I guess in the time I have left, the other issue I wanted to address was childcare. Access to childcare is an issue for military families. We consistently hear from folks in my region about their struggles accessing military childcare. I I noted and was pleased that you mentioned that in your written remarks. As you know, the DoD currently spends more than $1 billion annually to provide childcare to military families. I know the Department of, and the Army are working hard to ensure that our service members receive the support that they deserve. Despite the relative affordability of military childcare, particularly compared to civilian providers, the DoD still has over 15,000 service members on childcare waiting lists. So how can Congress work with the Army to reduce those waiting lists and make sure our service members don't have to worry about finding someone to look after their kids? And how does childcare impact the Army's readiness and our soldiers' ability to serve our country?
Thanks, Congressman, for this question. As my children are grown now, but for a long time I was a working mom, so I'm very familiar with the challenges, both the importance of quality childcare and the challenges of finding it and paying for it. And I would say there are really two big issues for us as we look at wait lists. One, obviously, is capacity. You know, the more capacity we can have, the shorter we can have wait lists. So that's why we've, included money, for example, in this budget for a CDC at Fort Polk, and we built a handful of CDCs in last year's budget as well with your support. The other thing that helps us with our wait lists is obviously staffing at our child care centers, and that's an area where we are facing challenges now because, again, the labor market is very tight, and we are competing with the civilian sector for staff. And we've authorized, for example, our commanders to be able to hire at 110% to try to make sure that we have the staff so that we can fully man our CDCs. But those are definitely, just continuing to support in our budget funding for MILCON for CDCs, for our fee assistance program, for the incentive program that we have for our in-home child care, where folks, who are PCSing if they're participating in our in-home child care program and then do it at the location they move to, that's very helpful. So you all continuing to support that is very helpful to us.
Thanks very much. And thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. And childcare is something that members are coming up to me on the floor talking about already, especially some of the waivers that you had available. Members, we have time for a couple more questions. We're going to go through. It's going to be 2 minutes, and at about 5 to the hour, I will make my last question then and close it up. But Mr. Calvert would like to do his last question now. Mr. Calvert.
Yeah, and a couple of comments. First, as Mr. Womack is very well aware of, the State Partnership Program is a program with the Guard that works very well. And obviously, the California Guard, we're very proud of what they did in Ukraine to train up the Ukrainian military, obviously with great success. On the Stinger missile program, the Brits, I think you're probably aware of this, have a missile called Starstreak, would maybe be a comparable replacement for us. I know it'd be a foreign acquisition, but it's I understand a more capable missile goes to 16,000 feet, goes up to Mach 4, and I think a similar price point. Other issue is small arms ammo. I know we talk about hypersonics and other long-range fires, and it's all important, but also we need ammunition. And last year we had an insufficient amount of money that was requested. We added $80 million to that, which obviously was needed. But I worry about the small arms industrial base, that we can continue to make sure that we ramp up small arms production to make sure we have sufficient stores if in case of a conflict like we're having right now. So I would hope you would agree with that, and if you have any quick comments, I'd be happy to hear them.
Congressman, I think it is important, obviously, that we make sure that we have sufficient ammunition stocks, small arms and otherwise. And I think one of the things I believe in the last supplemental request that came over was a new authority, I think, to try to help us stay ahead, if you will, on critical munitions and make sure that we're able to stockpile in advance. So I think that's something that might be helpful as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Ruthersberg.
Yes, Secretary Warmoth, based on the details in your budget documents for fiscal 2023, your basic research, applied research, and advanced technological development accounts are trending down, and you are now aligning 82% of your science technology funding to the Army modernization priorities. long-range precision fires, next-generation combat vehicles, future vertical life, network, air, and missile defense, and soldier lethality. How are you ensuring that legacy S&T organizations like Army Research Lab, headquartered in Maryland and Aberdeen, and your basic accounts are apparently sustained throughout your modernization sprint? And I'm going to be there this Friday. So.
Congressman, certainly the work of Army Research Lab remains important, and I think, we have seen them make some very important contributions. So what we're trying to do in our budget now is to balance, obviously, the finite resources we have. We're trying to make sure that we continue to maintain our momentum across all 6 of those modernization portfolios that you mentioned. We're trying to also make sure that we continue to invest prudently in enduring systems that are important, like tanks and Bradleys and Strykers, for example. And we're trying to make sure that we continue our S&T work. So, those accounts may go up and down a little bit from year to year, but the work of the Army Research Lab remains very important.
You're back.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Do you have a? No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Womack?
Yeah, just quickly about the National Guard. Ken talked a minute ago about the fact that his California folks have done a great job, and I credit the work of the Guard in Ukraine with helping prepare the junior officers over there for quite a remarkable resistance to this invasion. And not lost on me is the fact that in the Guard, you can serve your country if you're predisposed to serving your country, and still work in a civilian environment where, as we all know, it's a very competitive job climate out there. So I know what the Army is trying to do in attract more and more people to come in. You're competing with the civilian workforce and the increased wages there and this sort of thing. So what can you tell us, either one of you, what can you tell us about the role of the Guard in the future in the future Army, and whether it is going to continue to be part of our operational strategy, or whether it will one day be relegated to more or less a strategic type reserve as we once knew it?
Congressman, I think the National Guard, the Army Guard, is incredibly important, and I spent a lot of time working Guard issues as the debate about moving from a strategic reserve to an operational reserve was underway. I think we've gained enormous lessons learned from, and the components, I think, have come together in an amazing way in the last 20 years because they have served overseas in the field together. And I think we're very much going to continue that operational reserve approach. The Army Guard has been incredibly busy the last couple of years, both overseas and here at home, and I think we'll continue an operational reserve. My son-in-law is in the Pennsylvania National Guard, the Army Guard, and he deployed in support of COVID last year and is, I think has had an amazing experience, just as you said, being able to be a member of the Guard, but then also have a civilian job.
Ms. Kaptur.
Yes, I just wanted to state for the record, in terms of Central Europe and Ukraine, bringing you back to the part of the country I represent, Cleveland, Ohio, is sister city is Gdańsk, Poland. Parma, Ohio, sister city is Lviv, Ukraine. If we look at the state partnerships under the Guard, if we look at Illinois, their sister country is Poland. Michigan, I think, is partnered with Lithuania. I'm not sure. Ohio's partnered with Hungary and Serbia. So I'm just saying that there are traditional relationships on the ground that you might not think of because you think of major bases. Our part of the country has Guard and Reserve. But we also have these traditional relationships that are really important. And so I look forward to speaking with someone from Army about just the logistical potential, the unmet logistical potential of our region. Secondly, I will say this also for the record. Madam Secretary, I appreciate very much the work of the department in helping to review the case of a soldier who fought in Vietnam. What was missing from the letter from the Department of Army was the historical context in which they fought. There was no more costly battle than La Drang Valley in that war. And when a determination comes back that there were no corroborating statements pertaining to a given soldier's duties, they were all dead, but for one. And I could find nothing in the manual that deals with last soldier standing. In this case, he wasn't standing, he was dying on the ground. And so I'm going to write you a reply and hope that it can, I don't know if this can be appealed in any way, but I would like to find a way to do that and have the historical context of 7th Cav in the Battle of La Drang Valley at Landing Zone X-Ray as part of the review. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Capper. And just so my constituents back home don't think that I care about Minnesota, it has not been mentioned yet at this hearing, we are aligned with Croatia. Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Army's Future Command stated they would place an emphasis on working with small business. GAO reported last year that AFC could do a better job at working with small business, especially in the area of research and development. Please share with us the steps that you are taking to ensure that small business is an equal partner.
Thank you, Congressman, and General McConville may want to add to this, but my understanding is, certainly when I've gone down to see Army Futures Command, they have been working very closely with small business and work regularly and have, quarterly, if not monthly, sort of meetings with the small business community, not just in Austin, but in other places as well. I think, we view the small business community as an important source of innovation and new ideas, new technologies, and part of why the Army decided to place Futures Command in Austin, which, as you know well, is an incredible hub for tech, was precisely that, to give us some connective tissue with the small business community. So I will look into if there needs to be more work there, but that is front and center in AFC's work.
Thank you, General.
No, Congressman, one of the things I've seen with the approach that Futures Command has taken, rather than historically, the old slow process was come out with a huge requirements document, probably piled to the ceiling. Only a very large industry could take that on. Now what they do is they put out a problem. They bring in all the industry partners and small businesses, and they say, hey, we'd like to solve this problem. Give us some ideas. They come back with white papers. They get a little money if they make the cut, and so they might come up with an innovative way that helps us define the characteristics for the next round. They come back with design, and that allows them to get their ideas in and get under contract, and then eventually actually compete at a much higher level. So we're trying that. We probably have more work to do on it, but we do want that innovation in Army Futures Command.
Well, pardon me, I think that's very important, and I appreciate what you're doing. When I was about 2006, a guy came into my office with a plastic windshield. He said, this will take 15 30 caliber rounds without shattering. And I showed it to the folks out of Fort Hood, and they went, boy, do we need that. I don't know.
Thank you.
He never could get through.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
We got to look for these people with those ideas.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Mr. Kilmer.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, I understand the need for the Army to increase readiness to combat global threats, and the shifting medical billets is part of that balancing act. I know the Chair referenced this in her opening remarks. I do just want to raise the concern that these reductions and the inability to backfill them could seriously impact access to care for service members and their families. I have heard from both military and civilian providers in my neck of the woods that they are already struggling to hire medical professionals. I'm afraid these billet reductions will exacerbate that problem. I understand that the Defense Health Agency is responsible for backfilling civilians or contractor replacement, but what happens if they are unable to rehire those positions? And what impact will that have on the Army's readiness?
Thank you, Congressman. As you noted, this is, I think, we're working with Defense Health Agency, as are the other services, as we sort of, complete this transition. But I, too, have heard the concerns about the reduction in billets, and I've heard concerns as I've gone around to installations and communities about what that's going to mean in terms of access to care. So I think, we're trying to work closely with Defense Health Agency and talk to them about what we're seeing and make sure that they understand with urgency the need to bring on new hires. I think some of this has been exacerbated by the fact that a number of our medical professionals were drawn into supporting the COVID response in communities all around the country. A lot of those folks have now returned to the Department of the Army and are going back into our hospitals. But we do, I think, have to keep a close eye on this because we don't want our readiness to be affected.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. So just to add on to what Mr. Kilmer said, at one of the discussions I had at one of the installations out in California, and it was several years ago. I don't think it was an Army installation when this was first being discussed. We have more women than ever serving in the military. That's a good thing. But then when you start saying we're going to limit obstetrics, gynecology, and even pediatricians with childcare, getting your child in and out for wellness checkups is going to affect, readiness, morale, and I think retention into the future. So I know you're well aware of it as you shared, your personal experiences. I've had them as a mom too. I think our voices need to be heard at the table, sitting along with our brothers and our fathers who are sitting at the table with us. Which leads me to a question that I am just baffled by. General, I'm beyond concerned that your unfunded requirement list includes female body armor for the second year in a row. Unfunded? This should be a priority. And I quote from a budget justification document. If not funded, this will create personal safety issues due to lack of proper fit of small statured body armor. I've been in theater when I've been handed, body armor that would fit you a lot better than it would me. It's just not the fit, the protection, but it's also the ability for that soldier, for her to be able to fill her job, to have herself not only protected, but be able to have the back of the soldier next to her. Can you explain to me why this is on your unfunded priority request?
Well, Chair, we have a program, and we are aggressively getting after that capability. We've been fielding it along, and what we've done is to accelerate many of these programs we have are 4 or 5 year programs. In order to complete the program faster, we put it on the unfunded priority list and try to get it fielded faster.
Well, sir, I've never done this before in a hearing. That's just not a satisfactory answer. Okay. Women are not a second-class priority in the United States military and their protection. I know you personally don't feel that way, so I don't mean it directed at you. I'm directing it to Big Army. This needs to get fixed and fixed now. My question for the record is going to be on the, besides the staff's budgetary questions, is on the your Arctic strategy. And as we know, as with climate change, as the Arctic thaws out, Russia is a major player in that area, being an Arctic nation right across the water from us. China considers itself a near-Arctic nation, which is, baffling to geography teachers, but they do nonetheless. So this is going to be very contested space. And this is why climate change, as part of our national security, we have to address it, but we also have to be prepared to build resiliency in. So I'm going to have some questions about weather modernization and all-terrain vehicles and other things. I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you for your understanding that we cannot be in session much longer here because of the joint session on the floor. I want to thank you again, Madam Secretary. I want to thank you, General. But please share our gratitude to the men and women who serve both in uniform and in civilian clothes alongside with you for working to keep our country safe, strong, and secure. With that, this concludes today's hearing.